Every year, sometime in the middle of August, Japan celebrates a festival known as Obon Festival. It's an annual Japanese holiday which commemorates and remembers deceased ancestors. It's believed that the spirits return at this time to visit their relatives. Well, I'm in Japan right now and I definitely don't have any relatives in Japan. So I figured let's just visit the spirits of somebody else's relatives. I'm reading a book known as Ningen Shikaku, and the author of the book, Osamu Dazai, I figured, was buried in a graveyard somewhere in Tokyo. So I decided to take some time out of a Saturday on a day in which a typhoon is predicted here. So yeah, good for me. And I'm visiting the spirit, hoping that the spirit of Osamu Dazai comes back to his grave today. So here I am at Mitaka in the graveyard. Kind of figured out this place by searching on Google Maps. I know what his name's kanji looks like because all the graveyards here have kanji on them. So I've been looking here for around 15 minutes and I think his graveyard is located here somewhere. I wanted to visit him just because, well, it kind of deepens the experience of reading the book. So here it is, the graveyard of Osamu Dazai. So it's the 12th of August and I'm in Japan. It's been a few months since I've come here, and after a year of waiting to enter Japan, I'm finally here and filming a video. I remember at the start of the year when I was still stuck in India due to the COVID travel ban, I'd given myself a goal of making a video every week in 2022. It's August now and this is my first one. So to be fair, I did switch countries. I started a brand new job in a different function, geography and industry. So I had a lot going on. Yeah, now that I'm done explaining myself, let's get to the book, Ningen Shikaku. So this book is written by an author called Osamu Dazai. And the word Ningen Shikaku in Japanese roughly translates to no longer human. I have never heard of this book in my life. The way I came across this book is we were in Shinjuku in Cocoon Building Library, which is a place in Japan. I asked one of my friends to recommend me a Japanese classic. The book that I was recommended was this one. Little did I know at that point of time that it would turn out to be one of the most depressing books that I have ever read. To be fair, I should have got a clue from the name of the book, A Shameful Life. Yeah, so pro tip, if you are not in a good place or if you're going through a bad patch in your relationship, please do not read this book because it is extremely depressing. Essentially, this book it's a 3-part journal of a really depressed man named Yozo. So the 3-part journal is essentially divided into his childhood, his youth and his adult life. And these 3 journals were found eventually by the author. Along with these 3 journals, he also found 3 sets of photographs. And the book actually starts with the author describing the 3 photographs as being one of the most depressing photographs, or 3 of the most depressing photographs that he's ever seen. But yeah, that's how the book starts, on a rather depressing note. So we'll start with the first journal, which is about his childhood. So this guy named Yozo was born in a remote part of Japan. He was born in a fairly rich family, an aristocratic family. His father was a politician, so it's not like he had issues in his life. He never had problems like hunger, etc. But the issue with Yozo was that he was extremely unsocial. He found people around him very difficult to comprehend. He found the practicalities of life extremely difficult to comprehend. For one example, in the book, he talks about how he feels joy and a lot of happiness from looking at a bridge over the train tracks in Japan. But when he realizes that the bridge is not an ornamentation or like a playground, but a very practical element for people to climb over and reach the other side of the stairs of the tracks, it makes things really boring for him. So that's his thought process from an early age. He finds mundane rituals like people, like his family was a family of 10 and they used to sit and eat every day. And he found the fact that people had to go to work, and the reason why they go to work is to earn money, and the reason why they want money is just to eat food, and the reason they want to eat food is just that they don't die. He found this whole activity of the life cycle of people around him to be extremely depressing. And that's how his life began. He was a people pleaser. He could not find it in himself to disagree with someone. He always had to please his father, for example. To complicate matters, he was molested as a kid by his servants, and he did not have the courage to tell his parents because he just didn't trust his parents as well. So his childhood began on a very depressing note. Chapter ends on this depressing note, and it kind of sets him up for failure through his life. And the book, essentially, if you go through the second journal and the third journal, you realize that this guy has never had a win in his entire life. Like, he goes from one step of losing to another step of losing to he just keeps losing, except for one moment in the third journal. This brings me to the second part of the book, which is his youth life. So in this stage of his life, he came to Tokyo to do his university studies, where he met a friend, probably the only friend who saw through his bullshit. So Yozo, at this point of time in his life, to cover the mask of sadness, he had turned into a bit of a clown. He used to crack jokes, he used to make people laugh, but inside he was always very, very sad about his life. There was only one friend who kind of saw through this bullshit. He pointed that out, and that really scared Yozo. This friend recommended Yozo to take up painting as a hobby, and Yozo basically drew the most difficult portraits and the most demonic portraits that he was really scared to show anybody. During this painting classes, he met a friend named Horiki. Horiki was, let's just say, the worst friend you can possibly have. He introduced Yozo to cigarettes, to prostitution, to liquor. He turned Yozo into an absolute alcoholic. One of the sentences in the book mentions how Yozo found these three things or these three distractions as a good way to hide his fear of people. And that's how it evolved into a sense of alcoholism. He was having affairs with many women. The second chapter actually ends with him having a one-night stand with a married woman. Somehow, and I don't know how, he convinced this woman to commit suicide with him. He goes to Kamakura with this woman, jumps into the river. Somehow only the woman ends up dying and he's still alive. So at the end of the second chapter, not only is he in a state of crippling addiction, fear of people, but he has also killed a fellow human being. And he lives with this guilt trip conscience. So as you can see, his life graph is just continuously dropping. But it's not all bad. There is one point in the third chapter which is actually good. So this brings me to the third chapter of the book, which is about his adulthood. So in his adulthood now, he's actually caused a scandal. His father is a politician. He's committed suicide. He's caused the death of a fellow human being. There's a scandal. There's a police investigation around this. He's in a really bad place. He's been kicked out of university because his studies are suffering. At this point of time, basically, he is taken as a kept husband by another woman who has a child, and his job is essentially to take care of the child. And here as well, he turns to alcoholism because he is so sad and depressed about the state of his life. As Yozo would do, given the career path, if you would call it, he leaves the woman and the child and goes to live with some bar madam in Tokyo, it just takes his life further down. Over here, he actually meets a woman, which was probably the only positive light in his life. So she stops him from drinking. He actually starts drawing cartoons at this point of time in his life, and he becomes famous for his cartoons. And this is where his life gets to a bit of a positive arc, and he starts redeeming himself. But as fate would have it, this woman Yoshiro gets raped by a friend of Yozo. And at this point of time, Yozo does not do anything about the situation. He hates himself. He finds the innocence of Yoshiro lost and somehow hates himself for that as well. And again, now turns into not just alcoholism, but he also turns into drug addiction. Yeah, he starts taking morphine, etc. I don't know where he gets that from in that point of time in Tokyo, but yeah, so that's where his life goes. He ends up at the end of the third chapter or the third journal in a mental institution, and the end chapter has his father and brother taking him out of the mental institution, and just about Yozo reflecting about how horribly wrong his life has gone. So these were the 3 chapters, and more than the 3 chapters, which were actually quite depressing, the interesting part was the epilogue in this book, which is a comparison of Yozo's life with the life of the author, Osamu Dazai. The author actually does commit multiple suicides or attempted multiple suicides in his own life. He actually tries to commit suicide with a woman at one point of time, wherein the woman dies and he survives. So that's actually a parallel from the book, which has led a lot of people to think that the life of Yozo and the thought process of Yozo was actually the thought process of the author, Osamu Dazai, who was a very controversial figure at that point of time. Japan had just gone through the Second World War. It was a fairly bleak time in the history of Japan, and the people of Japan actually identified with the thought process of Osamu Dazai and the rather bleak nature of his writings. So there was a feeling of loss, a feeling of despair at that point of time. The other interesting part of this is that a lot of places in this book, Osamu Dazai actually speaks about how he fools the world, how he is deceiving the world with his jokes and crafts, which leads a lot of people to think about, is he fooling us by writing this book, by drawing so many parallels? Where has he exaggerated? Where has he kept things honest? So that's what actually makes this book kind of interesting. It's literally written in a very polite tone, which makes a lot of the discussions in this book very relatable. You can actually relate to some of the thought processes that the author has in this book, but the consequences of the actions that the character takes and Osamu Dazai takes is actually leads you down a very, very depressing path. Fun fact, Osamu Dazai actually killed himself a few months after completion of this book. So yeah, that's Ningen Shikaku for you, the first book that I read in Japan. Honestly, it was not the kind of book I wanted to read, but yeah, it is an absolute classic, and hopefully the next books will be much more lighthearted. So thank you very much. I will see you in the next video. Bye.
Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Books with Sven. Today, Bali Style Edition.
Hello, I'm Aya. I'm from Chiba Prefecture next to Tokyo. And I've been living in Tokyo over 15 years.
And I have a very special book for you. It's from Haruki Murakami. It's a very famous Japanese author, and the title of the book of today's episode is Man Without Woman. So basically like me.
And I'm working for aesthetic and jewelry company right now.
You might think about Man Without Woman, that's a very silly name, like what could be so fascinating about this book? I tell you, it's not about what the book cover is telling you, it's about what the book cover is not telling you.
Thank you.